The Merovingian dynasty ruled the Franks from 481, when Clovis I rose to power, until 751, when Childeric III was deposed and replaced by the Carolingian dynasty. For nearly 3 centuries, the Merovingians held sway over the largest and most powerful realm in Western Europe, shaping the destiny of the early medieval world. Their origins remain shrouded in mystery. The dynasty takes its name from Merovec, a semi-legendary leader of the Salian Franks. Some sources suggest he fought alongside the Romans at the Battle of the Catalonian Fields in 451, yet the line between history and legend blurs here. Was Merovec a mere tribal chieftain, or something far more enigmatic? It was his grandson, Clovis I, who transformed the Merovingian dynasty into a force that dominated Gaul and parts of northern Germany. By uniting the Frankish tribes under a single rule, Clovis laid the foundation of Frankish supremacy. Yet upon his death the kingdom fractured. True to the Frankish custom of partible inheritance, his sons divided the realm, fueling disunity and civil war that haunted the dynasty for generations. The Merovingians, known as the long-haired kings, guarded their authority with strange rituals and symbols. Their flowing hair was more than vanity, it was a sacred emblem of their right to rule. To cut a Merovingian king's hair was to strip him of his power. Many rivals were tonsured and forced into monasteries, a fate considered worse than death. New kings, meanwhile, were not crowned in the modern sense, but lifted upon a shield by soldiers, a haunting display of consent and legitimacy. Despite centuries of decline, the Merovingian dynasty endured, cloaked in an aura of sacred tradition and mystery. Even when real power slipped into the hands of the mayors of the palace, the Franks accepted no other bloodline as their kings, until the rise of the Carolingians ended their reign. The story of the Merovingian dynasty is one of power, myth, and ritual, an empire where legend and history walked side by side. The Merovingian dynasty, once the undisputed rulers of the Franks, gradually lost their grip on power. Over time their authority faded, eclipsed by the growing strength of the aristocracy and the rise of powerful mayors of the palace. None more famous than Charles Martel, the military leader who halted the Islamic advance into Western Europe. By 751, the dynasty had weakened so much that Martel's son, Pepin the Short, seized the throne for himself, inaugurating the Carolingian dynasty and ending Merovingian rule. Yet the origins of the Merovingian dynasty stretch back to the early confederation of Frankish tribes. Among them were the Salian Franks, settled in Belgic Gaul in 358 by the Western Roman Empire as foederati. In exchange for land, the Salians pledged military service to Rome, defending its frontiers and joining in decisive battles such as the Catalonian Fields in 451 against Attila the Hun. This arrangement with Rome allowed ambitious Frankish leaders to rise within the collapsing imperial structure. Some became high-ranking Roman officers, while others consolidated power over their territories as Rome's authority waned. One such leader was Clodio, who ruled from Tournai and expanded his influence across Belgium. By protecting Gallo-Roman citizens and providing what the empire could no longer guarantee, security and livelihood, Clodio entrenched Frankish authority in Gaul. After Clodio's death, leadership passed to a figure shrouded in mystery, Merovec. According to Gregory of Tours, he was Clodio's son. But the Chronicle of Fredegar offers a far stranger tale, that Merovec was the offspring of a sea creature, the Quinator, who assaulted his mother while she swam. This myth, connecting the Merovingian dynasty to supernatural origins, may have been an attempt to link the Franks with ancient traditions of divine kingship. Whether fact or legend, it added an aura of mystery to the dynasty's beginnings. What history does reveal is that Merovec fought against the Huns at the Catalonian Fields in 451 and later fathered Childeric I, who succeeded him as king of the Salian Franks around 458. From these murky origins, half legend, half truth, the Merovingian dynasty emerged, its power growing until it would dominate Western Europe for centuries. The early power of the Merovingian dynasty can be traced to King Childeric I, who reigned from 458 to 481. Archaeological evidence suggests that Childeric maintained close ties with the fading Roman Empire. In 463 he is said to have fought at Orleans, perhaps as a Roman ally, and his military campaigns along the Loire appear deeply entwined with Roman strategy. When his tomb was discovered in Tournai in 1653, among its treasures was a golden brooch reserved only for high-ranking imperial officials. Such a gift hints that Childeric was not merely a Frankish ruler, but also a Roman client king, one who skillfully used imperial connections to strengthen his position in northeastern Gaul. By the time of his death in 481, Childeric had laid the foundations for something far greater. His son, Clovis I, would transform the Merovingian dynasty into the true masters of Gaul. The reign of Clovis I is remembered for two monumental achievements: the unification of the Franks and his conversion to Christianity. In 486, Clovis struck at the remnants of Roman power in Gaul, defeating Syagrius, the last Roman commander, and seizing Soissons as his stronghold. From there, he launched a series of campaigns that reshaped the destiny of Western Europe. At the Battle of Tolbiac in 496, Clovis defeated the Alemanni, cementing his dominance along the Rhine. A decade later, at the Battle of Vuille in 507, he crushed the Visigoths, who had long been seen as rivals to Frankish expansion. Their defeat opened Aquitaine to Frankish control and signaled a decisive shift in power away from the old Roman world. Through marriage, Clovis expanded his influence further. His union with Clotilde, daughter of a Burgundian king, tied him to another royal house and gave him a foothold in Burgundy. More importantly, under her influence, Clovis embraced Christianity. His baptism not only set him apart from other Germanic rulers who clung to Arianism, but also won him the powerful support of the Roman Catholic Church. Even the Byzantine Emperor Anastasius I recognized his growing might, granting him the dignity of a Roman consul. But Clovis' rise was not built on faith and alliances alone. He wielded cunning and brutality in equal measure, eliminating rival Frankish kings through conquest and assassination. By the time of his death in 511, Clovis bore the title King of all the Franks. With most of Gaul under his command, save only Burgundy, Provence and Septimania, the Merovingian dynasty had truly become a kingdom, born from a fusion of Roman legacy, Frankish might and ruthless ambition. One of the most enduring legends of the Merovingian dynasty centers on Clovis I's conversion to Catholicism. Tradition places this moment in the year 496, during the fateful Battle of Tolbiac. At that time, Clovis was still a pagan, unmoved by the pleas of his Christian wife, Clotilde, who urged him to abandon his ancestral gods. According to Gregory of Tours, as the battle turned against the Franks, Clovis cried out in desperation to the Christian God, vowing to be baptized if victory could be granted. In the next instant, the tide shifted and the Franks triumphed. True to his word, Clovis accepted baptism, joined by his sisters and 3,000 of his warriors. In a single act, the ruler of the Franks bound his dynasty to the Catholic faith. Yet historians remain skeptical. Was this truly a moment of spiritual revelation, or a calculated political move? Many of Clovis' new Gallo-Roman subjects were Catholic, and conversion may have been a way to win their allegiance. His choice also set him apart from other Germanic rulers who followed Arian Christianity, giving him a religious justification for waging war against the Arian Visigoths. The move even secured ties to the Byzantine Empire, which recognized Clovis as a legitimate ally. Whether motivated by faith or ambition, Clovis' baptism marked a turning point. It ensured the triumph of Catholicism over Arianism in Western Europe and cemented the Merovingian dynasty as champions of the Church. When Clovis died in 511, the kingdom he had forged was divided among his 4 sons. This division followed Germanic inheritance custom, though some scholars suggest Queen Clotilde herself may have influenced the arrangement to guarantee her sons' claims. Whatever the cause, the precedent was set, and with it, the seeds of disunity that would plague the Merovingian dynasty for centuries. At first, the sons of Clovis acted together to extend his legacy. They completed the conquest of Burgundy in 534, and shortly thereafter the Ostrogoths ceded Provence to Frankish control. In the east, they defeated the Thuringians in 531, pushing Frankish influence deep into Germanic lands, and by 555 the Saxons were forced to submit, paying a yearly tribute of 500 cows. These victories expanded the Merovingian realm to its greatest extent, and following the death of the Ostrogothic king Theodoric the Great in 526, the Merovingians stood unrivaled as the most powerful rulers in Western Europe. The dynasty that began in legend had now built an empire, but beneath the surface the cracks of division had already begun to show. Though the sons of Clovis expanded his empire, they also inherited his ruthless ambition. Infighting soon became the hallmark of the Merovingian dynasty. In 531, Theodoric I attempted to kill his half-brother Clovis I, only to die before his plans could succeed. Clovis seized the opportunity to claim his brother's kingdom by force, but a sudden violent storm scattered the armies and spared Francia from war. Peace, however, was fleeting. Just 1 year later, Clovis and his brother Childebert murdered 2 of their own nephews to strengthen their grip on power. The cycle of betrayal continued. In 555, Childebert incited Clovis' son, Cram, into open rebellion. While Clothar was away campaigning against the Saxons, Cram raised the banner of revolt, only to be defeated in 560. His punishment was merciless. He and his family were burned alive at the order of his father. This shocking act of brutality set the tone for Merovingian succession, where fratricide, assassination and civil war became the dynasty's bitter inheritance. By 558, Clothar I outlived all his brothers and claimed once more the title King of all the Franks. But his triumph was short-lived. Upon his death in 561, the kingdom was divided yet again among his 4 sons, plunging the realm back into partition. It was in this fractured world that one of the bloodiest rivalries in the history of the Merovingian dynasty emerged, not between kings but between queens. By 567, 3 brothers ruled over separate realms: Sigebert I in Austrasia, Guntram I in Burgundy and Chilperic I in Neustria. Both Sigebert and Chilperic married Visigothic princesses, sisters Brunhilda and Galswinthe. But Chilperic soon tired of Galswinthe, ordering her strangled so that he could wed his mistress, Fredegund. Galswinthe's murder ignited a feud between her sister Brunhilda and Fredegund, a rivalry that would plunge the dynasty into decades of civil war. In 575, Sigebert was on the verge of defeating Chilperic when assassins, almost certainly sent by Queen Fredegund, struck him down. Chilperic's ambitions, however, were checked by his brother Guntram, who safeguarded the throne for Sigebert's young son, Childebert II. When Chilperic himself was murdered in 584, Guntram once again acted as protector, ensuring the survival of the infant heir, Clothar II. For a time, Guntram was the only adult king in Francia, ruling in trust for his nephews. But his death in 592 shattered the fragile balance. The conflict resumed, now fueled by the personal hatred of Brunhilda and Fredegund. Their enmity turned kingdoms into battlegrounds. Childebert II died mysteriously in 596, leaving his young sons, Brunhilda's grandsons, to carry on the struggle against Clothar II. The war dragged on until 612, when both brothers perished in yet another civil war, leaving the throne of Austrasia-Burgundy in the hands of the child King Sigebert II, with Brunhilda ruling as regent. By now, the nobles were weary of her iron grip. In 613 they betrayed her, calling on Clothar II to invade. His conquest was swift. The child king was executed, and Brunhilda suffered one of the most gruesome fates in history, tortured for 3 days before being tied to the limbs of horses and torn apart. With her death, nearly half a century of brutal civil war came to an end. Clothar II emerged as the sole ruler of the Merovingian dynasty, uniting the Frankish kingdoms once more. Yet the bloodshed had left scars that no crown could heal. The reigns of Clothar II and his son Dagobert I are often remembered as the height of Merovingian power, a rare era of peace and prosperity for the Frankish kingdoms. Yet this stability came at a cost. To secure their own positions, these kings made concessions to the aristocracy that would ultimately erode royal authority and hasten the dynasty's decline. In 614, Clothar II issued the Edict of Paris, a decree that decentralized power and granted sweeping authority to regional nobles. Just 3 years later, in 617, he gave further privileges to the mayors of the palace, an office that had once been nothing more than the king's household manager. By this point, however, the role had grown into the second most powerful position in the realm, with one mayor overseeing each of the 3 Frankish subkingdoms, Neustria, Austrasia, and Burgundy. Under Clothar's concessions, these mayors could rule their kingdoms independently, without fear of removal by the king. The result was a Faustian bargain, in the words of historian Susan Wise Bauer, a devil's deal. It preserved Clothar's reign, but it transferred lasting authority from the monarchy to the aristocracy. The growing power of the nobles soon forced even greater compromises. In 623, Austrasian magnates demanded that the dynasty maintain a royal presence in their lands, claiming Neustria was favored. To appease them, Clothar established Austrasia as a semi-autonomous subkingdom under his eldest son, Dagobert. Yet even as king, Dagobert's independence was an illusion. He remained bound to the will of the Austrasian elite. When Clothar II died in 629, Dagobert inherited the full Frankish throne and shifted his capital from Metz to Paris in a bid to weaken Austrasian influence. But the nobles resisted. By 634, Dagobert was forced to once again grant Austrasia its own subkingdom, ruled by his 3-year-old son Sigebert III. When Dagobert died in 639, the dynasty began its long twilight. His sons, Sigebert III of Austrasia and Clovis II of Neustria Burgundy, were both children. Real power fell into the hands of the aristocracy and the mayors of the palace, who who increasingly overshadowed the monarchy. Even when the young kings came of age, they remained little more than figureheads. Historians call them the Rois fainéants, the do-nothing kings. For more than a century, from 639 to 751, Merovingian rulers held the crown but not the power. Their sacred long hair still symbolized kingship, but behind the throne, the aristocracy and the mayors of the palace controlled the fate of the Frankish world. Thus, the Merovingian dynasty, born in legend, strengthened by conquest and legitimized by the church, slipped into irrelevance. What began as a line of warrior kings ended as a shadow monarchy, paving the way for the rise of the Carolingians. But even after the dynasty ceased to hold real authority, the Merovingian name still carried immense symbolic weight among the Franks. In 656, when King Sigebert III of Austrasia died, the mayor of the palace, Grimoald, saw his chance to seize power. He exiled Sigebert's young son, Dagobert II, to a monastery in Ireland and installed his own child, Childebert the Adopted, as king. Yet the experiment failed. The Austrasian nobles, though increasingly dominant, still clung to the idea that only a Merovingian could wear the crown. Outraged, they seized both Grimoald and Childebert, sending them to Neustria, where King Clovis II had them executed. Clovis then restored Merovingian legitimacy by placing his own son, Childeric II, on the Austrasian throne. Over the following decades, however, the monarchy's decline became irreversible. The true rulers were no longer kings but the mayors of the palace. Among these aristocrats, one family rose above all others, the Pippinids. From their line came Charles Martel, the warrior statesman who took control of Austrasia in 715 and transformed the office of mayor into the highest power in Francia. Charles's legacy was sealed in 732, when he defeated the Umayyad Caliphate at the Battle of Tours, halting the Muslim advance into Western Europe. By then, his authority was so absolute that he no longer bothered to crown a Merovingian puppet. For the last years of his rule, the Frankish throne sat empty, a silent admission that the Merovingians were kings in name only. After Charles's death in 741, his son Pepin the Short took the final step. In 751 he deposed the last Merovingian ruler, Childeric III, and crowned himself king, founding the Carolingian dynasty. With that, the line of Clovis, the long-haired kings who had once dominated Europe, was extinguished, their power passing into the hands of a new dynasty that would shape the medieval world. If you enjoyed this journey into the fall of the Merovingians, make sure to subscribe to History Love, your go-to channel for exploring the fascinating stories of the past.